The rope burns were fresh, angry red welts that told a story Marcus Thornfield didn't want to read. The woman slumped against his barn post, wrists bound so tight her fingers had gone white. Blood matted her dark hair, and her dress, once fine fabric, now torn and stained, spoke of wealth that had met violence. "Please," she whispered, eyes finding his in the pre-dawn darkness, "I'm begging you, untie me." Marcus held the lantern steady, its amber glow casting shadows that danced across her bruised face. 20 years of ranching had taught him to read trouble like storm clouds, and this woman was a hurricane waiting to happen. The smart thing would be to saddle his horse, ride to town, fetch Sheriff Coleman, let the law sort out why someone had left her tied up on his property like bait in a trap. But those eyes, Christ, those eyes held something that made his chest tighten, not just fear but a desperate kind of hope that seemed to recognize something decent in him, something worth gambling on. The Thornfield Ranch sat 15 miles from Copper Ridge, far enough that visitors were rare and usually brought either business or trouble. At 43, Marcus had learned to appreciate the solitude. His wife's grave marker stood beneath the oak tree near the house, and most days the silence felt like companionship rather than loneliness. He raised cattle, fixed fences, and minded his own affairs, a philosophy that had kept him alive through 3 range wars and countless smaller conflicts. Now this woman sat bound in his barn, and everything about the situation screamed danger. Her clothes suggested money, education, perhaps even connections to the territorial government in Santa Fe. The rope work showed expertise. Whoever had tied her knew their business, and the careful positioning right where he'd find her during morning chores felt deliberate. "Who did this to you?" he asked, setting the lantern on a hay bale. She flinched when he moved closer, then forced herself to meet his gaze. "Men who won't stop looking until they find me." "What men?" "The kind who don't leave witnesses." Marcus studied her face, searching for deception. Fear was easy to fake, but the bone-deep exhaustion in her posture felt real. Still, he'd survived this long by trusting his head over his heart. The smart choice remained unchanged. Ride to town, let the sheriff handle whatever storm she'd brought to his doorstep. She seemed to read his hesitation. "They'll kill me," she said simply. "The moment you leave, they'll come back and finish what they started." Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky had been clear at sunset. Marcus looked toward the barn door, then back at the woman. 20 years of solitude had taught him the weight of choices made in darkness. Marcus knelt beside her, his calloused fingers working at the rope around her wrists. The knots were professional, tight, secure, meant to hold. "What's your name?" "Elena Vasquez." She winced as circulation returned to her hands. "My father owns the Vasquez Mining Company. 3 days ago someone murdered him and made it look like bandits." The name hit him like cold water. Everyone in the territory knew Vasquez, the man who'd built half the mines between Albuquerque and Denver, who'd made enemies of cattle barons and politicians alike by refusing to sell his claims. If Elena was telling the truth, she wasn't just trouble, she was the kind of trouble that reshaped maps and started wars. "You're saying someone killed him for the mines." "I'm saying someone killed him because he discovered who's been selling weapons to the Apache." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, "And I was there when he found the proof." Marcus sat back on his heels, rope falling from suddenly numb fingers. Apache raids had plagued the territory for months, growing bolder and better armed with each attack. Just last week they'd hit the Morrison Ranch 30 miles south, leaving nothing but ashes and graves. If someone was supplying them with repeating rifles and ammunition, who? He asked. Judge Harrison, Sheriff Coleman, maybe others. Elena rubbed her wrists, leaving smears of blood on her torn sleeves. "My father had documents, photographs of transfers. Harrison's been using his position to organize the sales. Coleman's been providing safe passage. They're getting rich while settlers die." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Marcus had known Coleman for 15 years, had trusted the man to keep the peace when violence threatened to spill over from neighboring counties. The judge was respected, feared, connected to powerful men in Washington. If Elena spoke truth, then justice itself was corrupted. "You have proof." Had proof. "They burned everything when they killed Papa." She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. except what's in here. She tapped her temple. Account numbers, dates, names, enough to hang them all if I can reach the territorial marshal. Denver's 200 miles. I know. Thunder rolled closer now, and Marcus caught the scent of rain on the wind. In a few hours the storm would wash out the creek crossing, making travel impossible for days. If Elena was running from Coleman and his men, she was trapped. They'll come here, he said, voicing what they both knew. Yes, when they find you gone, they'll know someone helped. Yes. Marcus walked to the barn door, peering into the darkness. No signs of riders yet, but dawn was still 2 hours away. If he was going to make the smart choice, saddle up, ride for town, pretend he'd never found her, now was the time. Behind him, Elena's voice carried a quiet dignity that reminded him of his wife in her final days. I won't ask you to die for me, Mr. Thornfield, but I'm asking you not to hand me over to my killers. The first drops of rain spattered against the barn roof like distant gunfire. The storm hit with territorial fury, turning the world beyond the barn into sheets of driving rain. Marcus had moved Elena to the house, given her dry clothes and hot coffee, and now they waited in the kitchen while lightning painted the windows white. Every thunder crash could have been hoofbeats, every gust of wind the sound of approaching riders. Tell me about your father, Marcus said, checking his rifle for the dozenth time. Elena sat at his table, wearing one of his wife's old dresses. The blue fabric was faded but clean, and it transformed her from desperate fugitive to something that looked almost normal, almost safe. He came from Mexico with nothing but determination and a gift for finding silver where others saw only rust. She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, seeking warmth. Built an empire by being honest when everyone else was corrupt. It's what killed him. And you, why weren't you killed with him? I was supposed to be. They came at night, said they were investigating reports of Apache activity near our mine. Papa knew better. He'd been expecting something like this. Told me to hide in the old shaft while he dealt with them. Her voice caught. I heard the gunshots, heard them talking afterward about making it look like a raid. They spent an hour searching for me before giving up. Through the kitchen window, Marcus caught a glimpse of movement, shapes that might have been men on horseback, or just tricks of rain and shadow. He moved to get a better angle, rifle ready. How many? 6 when they came for Papa. Coleman, Harrison, and 4 others I didn't recognize. Professional killers by the look of them. The shapes resolved into riders, 5 men moving carefully through the storm, spread out in a search pattern. They'd found his ranch, and they weren't leaving until they'd finished their business. Seller, Marcus said, but Elena shook her head. They'll search everywhere, and when they don't find me they'll assume you helped. Either way you're a dead man. She was right. The moment those riders had appeared on his horizon, his choice was made. He could die fighting or die crawling, but Coleman wouldn't leave witnesses any more than he'd leave Elena alive to testify. Then we make them pay for it. Marcus blew out the kitchen lamp, plunging the house into darkness. Through the window, he watched the riders split up, 2 heading for the barn, 2 circling toward the back of the house, 1 remaining in the yard as lookout. Professional tactics, military precision. These weren't ordinary hired guns. Can you shoot? He whispered. Elena nodded, accepting his wife's small revolver with steady hands. Papa taught me, said a woman in mining country needed to protect herself. Lightning flashed, illuminating the face of the man approaching the kitchen window. Marcus recognized him. Tom Bradley, a former cavalry sergeant who'd been cashiered out for selling army supplies to smugglers. Now he worked as muscle for whoever paid best. Bradley, Marcus called out, making his voice carry over the storm. This is private property. Open up, Marcus. We're looking for something that belongs to us. Don't see how anything could belong to you out here. Girl ran off from town, might be dangerous, killed her own father for his money. We're just trying to bring her back safe. Even through the rain and wind, Marcus could hear the lie in Bradley's voice, but more concerning was the way the other riders had gone silent. They were moving into position, preparing for a coordinated assault. Storm's getting worse, Marcus called back. Why don't you boys head back to town? Come back when the weather clears. Bradley's laugh carried no humor. Can't do that, Marcus. Orders are orders. Through the back window, Elena pointed toward the barn. Smoke was rising despite the rain. They'd torched his hay stores to flush them out or provide distraction. The bastards were prepared for a siege. Marcus checked his ammunition one final time. 18 rounds for the rifle, 6 for his sidearm. Against 5 professional killers, it would have to be enough. In the lull between lightning strikes, Elena pressed something into Marcus's palm, a small silver locket, warm from her body heat. My mother's, she whispered. She died when I was 12. Papa always said she'd want me to give this to someone who believed in doing right, even when it was hard. Marcus opened the locket by touch, feeling the tiny photograph inside. Even in darkness, he could sense the weight of trust being placed in his hands. Why me? Because you could have tied me back up, ridden to town, collected whatever reward they're offering. Instead you're here. She touched his face briefly, fingers tracing the scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw, a reminder of his own war against corruption, fought 20 years ago in a different place. Some people are born to fight for what's right. I think you're one of them. Outside, Bradley's voice cut through the storm again. Marcus, we know she's in there. Make this easy on yourself. Send her out, and we'll let you live. Elena started to speak, but Marcus silenced her with a gesture. He'd heard the sound of breaking glass from the back bedroom. They were coming in regardless of negotiations. She's not here, Marcus called back, even as he moved toward the hallway. Searched the property twice, nothing but cattle and empty buildings. Then you won't mind if we take a look for ourselves. The kitchen door exploded inward, as Bradley kicked it open, shotgun in hand, but Marcus was already in position behind the heavy oak table, rifle trained on the doorway. The first shot took Bradley center mass, spinning him backward into the storm. From the bedroom came the sound of another window breaking, followed by heavy footsteps on wooden floors. Elena crouched beside the kitchen stove, revolver steady despite the chaos erupting around her. How many children? She asked suddenly, nodding toward the bedroom where children's drawings still decorated one wall. Marcus's attempt to preserve something of the family he'd lost to fever 3 years past. 2, Sarah and James. Even in the middle of a gunfight, the names came easily. They'd be about your age now. They'd be proud of their father. A figure appeared in the hallway. One of the hired killers, pistol drawn. Elena's shot took him in the shoulder, sending him staggering back with a curse. Marcus's follow-up shot ended the threat permanently. 3 down, Elena said, reloading with practiced efficiency. Through the shattered kitchen door, Marcus could see movement in the yard. 2 riders remained, but they'd taken cover behind his water trough, using the storm and darkness to mask their positions. This would be a waiting game now. Patience versus desperation. Tell me about your wife, Elena said, surprising him. Margaret, schoolteacher from back east, who thought she could civilize the frontier one student at a time. Marcus smiled despite their circumstances. She was probably right. Children loved her, even the rough ones. Said she could see the good in everybody. What would she think of this? Marcus considered the question while keeping watch on the yard. She'd say a man who won't stand up for what's right isn't much of a man at all. She'd also probably remind me that justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Another flash of lightning revealed both remaining riders moving toward the house, using the barn fire as cover. Professional to the end, they knew the storm wouldn't last forever, and daylight would favor whoever controlled the high ground. Elena squeezed his hand briefly. Thank you, for believing me, for protecting me, for being the kind of man who still exists in this world. Thank your father for raising a daughter worth protecting. The final assault came with the last thunder. Both riders rushed the house simultaneously, one through the kitchen, one through the back bedroom. Marcus dropped the first with a clean shot, but the second man, Sheriff Coleman himself, proved more dangerous than expected. Coleman's bullet splintered the oak table, sending splinters into Marcus's cheek, but Elena was ready, her revolver barking twice in quick succession. The corrupt sheriff staggered, clutching his chest, disbelief written across his weathered features. You're just a girl. I'm Miguel Vasquez's daughter, Elena replied coldly. And you murdered my father. Coleman fell to his knees, then forward onto the kitchen floor. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken, rain turning from sheets to scattered drops. In the sudden quiet, Marcus could hear his heart pounding. It's over, he said, though the words felt strange in his mouth. Elena moved to the window, peering out at the yard littered with bodies. No, this is just the beginning. Harrison's still alive, and he has connections all the way to Washington. When these men don't report back, then we make sure your story reaches the right ears. Marcus walked to his bedroom, returning with a leather satchel and a handful of papers, property deeds, correspondence with the territorial government, letters from my late wife's brother. He's a federal marshal in Colorado Springs. If we can get you there alive, you'll have protection and a platform to tell your story. Elena stared at him. You'd leave your ranch, your life here. This ranch has been more tomb than home since Margaret died. Maybe it's time I remembered how to live for something besides memory. They spent the next hour gathering supplies and evidence, including papers they found in Coleman's saddlebags that corroborated Elena's story. As dawn broke over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, they mounted Coleman's best horses and rode north, leaving behind a ranch that had served its purpose and graves that would tell their own story to whoever found them. The journey to Colorado Springs took 8 days, following mountain trails that avoided main roads and settlements where Harrison's influence might reach. Elena proved as tough as any frontier woman, never complaining about cold camps or hard ground. Marcus found himself talking more than he had in years, sharing stories of Margaret and the children, listening to Elena's memories of her father and dreams for the future. On the 9th day, they rode into Colorado Springs to find federal marshals already waiting. Elena's uncle in Denver had received word of Miguel Vasquez's death and begun his own investigation. Within a week, Harrison was arrested along with 6 other conspirators. The weapons supply line to the Apache was broken, and the territorial government began the slow process of rebuilding trust with settlers who'd lost faith in their protectors. Elena testified before a federal grand jury, her words carrying the weight of truth and the power of justice delayed but not denied. Marcus stood beside her throughout the proceedings, no longer just her protector, but her partner in ensuring that her father's death meant something. Years later, sitting on the porch of their small house in Colorado Springs, Elena would remember that night in the storm when a stranger chose to untie her bonds rather than preserve his own safety. She would remember the weight of her mother's locket in his palm, and the way justice sometimes comes not from institutions, but from individuals willing to risk everything for what's right. Marcus would remember too, how saving one woman's life had somehow saved his own, and how the courage to defy every rule had led him back to a life worth living. The locket remained on Elena's dressing table, a reminder that some choices echo through generations, and some storms clear the air for better days ahead.